Story 1. The Letters in Ashwood. Some towns don't die with a bang. They die with an envelope. A plain white rectangle that slips into your mailbox while you sleep and changes everything before breakfast. This is not a ghost story. This is what happens when someone decides your secrets are public property. Read it like a warning, not entertainment. I was 12 when it started, living in a cold town so quiet you could hear a screen door slam from 3 streets away. My mom worked the post office counter, smiling at everyone while her eyes collected every secret people accidentally spilled. My stepfather worked nights underground, coming home before sunrise with black dust in the creases of his hands. Our house sat on a street where everyone had a porch and everyone watched everyone, not because they were evil, but because there was nothing else to do. You learned who was struggling by the brand of cereal in their cart. You learned who was fighting by the silence after church. Then one Tuesday morning, in early spring, Mrs. Greta Niles ran into the post office like she was on fire. Her hair was still half set, her face red, her hands shaking so hard the envelope flapped like a bird trying to escape. She slammed it down in front of my mom and demanded to know who had touched her mail. Plain white, no return address. Her name printed in careful block letters, the kind a teacher uses when they do not want their handwriting recognized. Inside was 1 page, no threats, no swearing, just a list of things nobody should have known. Her husband had owed money to a bookie in the city, the amounts, the dates, the place he met the man, even the old code word they used on the phone. But her husband had been dead for years, and the bookie had moved states away. Mrs. Niles kept saying the same line over and over, like prayer or panic. Someone is watching us. Within days, more envelopes appeared. The church treasurer got one that described how the donations had been skimmed a little at a time. The letter included a breakdown so specific it felt like the writer had been inside the account, watching every transfer. A teen boy got one that listed the exact weeks he stole from the collection plate. When he was confronted, he confessed without looking up. A woman on Sycamore Lane got one that detailed an affair she swore she never told a soul about. It mentioned a birthmark on a man she had only seen in the dark. She read the page twice, then sat down on the curb and started to cry like someone had cut a wire inside her. At first, people tried to laugh it off. A prank, a mean joke, a crazy person with too much time. But every envelope carried proof. Photocopies, receipts, details that could not be guessed. And the town did what small towns always do when fear arrives. It turned inward. Neighbors started watching windows instead of weather. People started locking doors in the daytime. My stepfather started checking our back steps before he let me take the trash out, like the mailbox had become a mouth and the street was waiting to bite. Half the town took turns sitting up at night, curtains cracked, coffee gone cold, eyes burning. Old Mr. Harlan Cobb stayed awake for 3 nights straight in a recliner by his window. He swore he never saw a soul. Yet every morning, another plain white envelope sat in somebody's box like it had grown there. The police chief collected the letters, but this was rural and poor and years behind. He could not run fancy tests. He only said the writing looked strange, like someone was forcing their hand to move wrong, maybe writing with the other hand. What made it worse was who got targeted. It was never the loud drunks or the town troublemakers. It was people everyone trusted. The Sunday school leader, the volunteer fire captain, the man who hosted the charity barbecue. The people who held the town together. Then, the letters went from shame to damage. A family received one that said their daughter was seeing a married man from the next county. The envelope included motel receipts and a photo taken from far away, a grainy proof that somebody had been following her. Her father read it, and something in him broke. He took a shotgun from his cabinet and drove off without a word. The next thing the town heard was sirens. Then the story spreading faster than truth. The man was shot. The father was arrested. And that night, the girl tried to end her life. The ambulance wailed through the dark, and every house heard it. Every house knew the letters had finally drawn blood. After that, the writer did not stop. They accelerated. A letter arrived for the police chief himself, explaining how he took bribes from local businesses to ignore violations. It named the owners. It named the amounts. It told where the money was hidden in his desk. State officers came in, opened the drawer, and found it exactly where the letter said it would be. By lunch, our town had no chief. The next wave of envelopes felt like a game. They did not just expose secrets, they exposed the investigations. One family received a letter saying their neighbor had been recording phone calls with equipment ordered from a catalog. The neighbor received a letter saying that family had been digging through his trash every night. Each side swore they were innocent. Each side had proof in their hands. People stopped talking. They started whispering. They started sleeping with weapons nearby, because once you believe someone can slip paper into your box without being seen, you start believing they can slip into anything. The hardware store sold out of deadbolts and motion lights. It did not matter. The envelopes kept coming. Then the letters changed again. They began predicting. A family got one saying their son would be caught stealing from the grocery on a certain day. On that day, he was caught. Another said a teen girl would be found drinking behind the church at a certain hour. At that hour, she was there. People started wondering if the writer was seeing the future or shaping it, pushing buttons until people moved exactly where the letter needed them to be. By the time I was 15, half the town had left. The school combined classes. The diner closed early. The streets felt wider, like fear had eaten the houses. My family stayed. We were too broke to run. And then we got our own envelope. It named my stepfather. It detailed how he had faked safety reports at the mine to meet quotas. It listed the dates of inspections. It listed the names of men who nearly died because of those lies. My mom read it in silence. My stepfather did not deny it. He just sat at the table like he had been waiting for that page his whole life. A month later, on a cold morning in early spring, my mom found an envelope addressed to everyone. Not a name, not a house, just the town. Inside was one line, printed in the same careful block letters. The truth has been served. My work here is complete. After that, the letters stopped. No confession, no arrest, no explanation, just silence. People tried to rebuild. Some pretended it had been a bad dream. Some cut off relatives forever. Some drank themselves hollow. Years later, when I drive through that town, I still see mailboxes like little mouths along the road. And I still catch myself thinking about how easy it was for someone to slide paper into them without being seen. Because if they can do that, they can be close enough to know everything. And you would never know they were there until you read your name. If this story made you check your mailbox tonight, drop a comment with where you are and what time you're watching. It sounds small, but it tells the algorithm you want more stories like this. And trust me, the next one is already waiting. Story 2. The Poisoned Pharmacy. They say poison is easy to hide if you serve it with a smile. In Hollow's End, we learned that trust has a taste. And ours came in a white bottle with a yellow label. Back in the late 90s, I was living in Hollow's End, Iowa, the kind of town that moved slow and smiled fast. I worked part-time at a hardware store and spent most mornings helping my Uncle Walter after his hip surgery. He was stubborn, sharp, and proud, the type of man who treated pain like an insult. He also trusted Merriweather's pharmacy the way people trust church, without thinking. The first death didn't feel like a warning. Mrs. Eleanor Voss was found in her recliner by her son, head tilted like she'd drifted off mid-thought. Folks said, heart attack, old age, God's timing. Then Mr. Royland Pike died the same way a few days later. No struggle, no panic, just silence. 2 peaceful deaths in a week. People shrugged, because shrugging is easier than admitting fear. Walter noticed the change before anyone else did. He said his vitamins tasted wrong, not bitter, not stale, just wrong, like metal that shouldn't be in your mouth. I laughed it off, blamed a new supplier. Then I saw the pill bottle. Inside the plastic, near the cap, there was a tiny bubbled scorch mark, like heat had kissed it from the inside. It made my stomach drop for no good reason, which is usually how the worst things start. That night, I found Walter sitting on the edge of his bed, pressing 2 fingers to his wrist like he was counting beats that weren't there. His pulse was slow, too slow, like his heart was learning to stop. A few mornings later, Walter got nauseous, pale, weak. He tried to hide it, insisted he was fine, but he was sweating through his shirt while sitting still. I told him to stop taking the vitamins. He argued, then gave in. Within a day, he looked better, and that should have calmed me. It didn't. It made me think the bottle mattered. I took it to Merriweather's and asked to speak to someone. A young clerk named Elliot barely glanced up. He said heat sealers malfunction sometimes. Nothing to worry about. I asked if I could keep the bottle, just in case. He reached for it too fast. Not angry, not rude, just quick, like he'd practiced that motion. "We need it for inventory," he said, and his smile didn't match his eyes. That night I asked around. Quiet questions. The kind you pretend are casual. It didn't take long to hear the same detail twice. Mrs. Voss filled her prescriptions at Merriweather's. Mr. Pike, too. Same month, same bright yellow label on the same white bottle. Then I heard another name, another death, another peaceful passing. And every time, Merriweather's was in the middle of it, like a clean white napkin hiding a stain. Walter started joking again, acting normal, and I kept that scorched bottle in a zip bag under my sink. I didn't know what I was saving it for. I just knew I didn't want it gone. A couple weeks later, a local reporter, Mara Lynn, came into the hardware store asking about the spike in elderly deaths. She wasn't dramatic, just focused, and that made her scarier than any headline. I told her about the taste, the burn mark, the way Elliot snatched the bottle. She listened like she was already halfway to the conclusion and just needed confirmation. Her article came out on a Friday. By noon, everyone in town had read it. By evening, Merriweather's closed for maintenance. The doors were chained, the windows covered. The sign still lit up, glowing friendly green above a building that suddenly felt like a crime scene. One family demanded an independent toxicology report. That's when the whispers turned into something heavier. The lab found traces of a compound that behaved like cyanide but didn't look like it on standard screens. A lab-altered poison used in tiny doses, just enough to push an old heart into failure and let the coroner call it natural. Natural. That word started sounding like a lie we told ourselves so we could keep sleeping. Police finally moved, not because they believed us, but because the paper made them look slow. And when they searched Merriweather's back room, the shock wasn't the chemicals, it was how neat everything was. Clean counters, labeled shelves. A man could kill you there and wipe his hands on professionalism. They arrested Dr. Silas Reeves, the pharmacist. Everyone liked him. He remembered birthdays. He handed out lollipops. He sponsored Little League. He smiled with his whole face. And when they walked him out in cuffs, he looked embarrassed, not guilty, like he'd been caught cheating at cards, not planning deaths. The story that came out was uglier than the poison. Debt, gambling, bad investments, a hidden mess behind a perfect storefront. Investigators said he'd been nudging certain seniors toward a premium vitality supplement line, the kind that came in those identical white bottles. He kept the batch numbers in a notebook. He logged dosage adjustments in tiny handwriting. It read like a shopping list, except the items were people. When the detectives came to our house, I gave them the scorched bottle. They tested it, same compound. The doctor told Walter, calmly, that if we'd waited another week, his heart might not have handled it. Walter nodded like he'd expected that answer, then asked if he could sit down. I'd never seen him ask permission to sit. The trial was a circus, but the evidence was quiet and lethal. Altered inventory logs, tampered seals, receipts for lab chemicals bought through a fake business. And that notebook, pages of names, dates, notes, like he was managing a garden. The defense tried to paint it as contamination, accidents, misunderstandings, but accidents don't keep records. After the sentencing, Merriweather's never reopened. Someone eventually bought the building and turned it into a pet grooming place. New paint, new sign, same walls. And that's the part that stuck in my throat. We all walked past it like the horror could be renovated out. Walter moved away the next spring, said he wanted to be closer to grandkids. He didn't say he wanted distance from that corner of town, but I heard it anyway. I stayed. I kept working. I kept buying my hardware and my groceries and pretending the world was stable. But every time I took a vitamin after that, I watched my own hand. I listened to my own swallow. I started noticing how easy it is to accept something just because it comes in a clean bottle with a friendly label. Years later, I ran into Elliot at a gas station off the highway. He was older, heavier, eyes tired. He recognized me instantly. He asked about Walter, then stared at the floor like it hurt to look up. Before he got back in his car, he said one thing, soft enough that I almost missed it. He wasn't the only one who knew how to do it, Elliot said. Then he drove away, and I stood there with my receipt in my hand, watching the taillights fade, realizing I didn't know if he meant other people in town, or other towns entirely. And on the way home, I caught myself checking my mailbox, even though it was broad daylight, even though the pharmacy was gone, even though I told myself it was over. I still don't buy anything that comes in a plain white bottle with a yellow label. Story 3. The Neighborhood Watch. The first break-in on our street happened in daylight, the kind that makes you feel stupid for ever believing in safe places. Mrs. Caldwell called it a burglary, like that word could keep it clean. But when you see somebody else's things dumped on wet concrete, drawers turned out like organs, you realize it's not about money, it's about access. Someone stepped into her space and moved around like they owned it. By the end of that week, it was 4 houses, toolboxes, jewelry, a laptop that had family photos on it. The police officer who showed up looked tired before he even spoke. He told us to lock our doors, report anything suspicious, and try to remember that property crimes spike sometimes. Then he left, and the silence he left behind felt heavier than the rain. That's when the note appeared in my mailbox. Not a flyer, not junk, a folded sheet with neat handwriting and a name that sounded official, Mr. Harlan Pierce, retired sheriff. New to the neighborhood, he wrote like a man used to being listened to. He said he'd noticed the pattern and he wanted to help us organize. A neighborhood watch, a real plan, a meeting at his house. Coffee, cookies, safety. I went because my wife was already checking the locks twice before bed. I went because everyone else went. Pierce stood in front of us like a preacher who had memorized our fears. He had a hand-drawn map of our street. He had times and dates. He said the crimes were not random. He said somebody was watching us. The way he said watching made the room go quiet. Then he told us the solution was simple. We needed to know each other's routines. We needed a phone tree, patrol shifts, better lights, better locks. And one more thing, we needed to share schedules, because you cannot protect what you cannot predict. We wrote everything down like obedient students. Work hours, gym days, church times, trips, which nights we came home late, who walked the dog, who left a spare key under the flower pot. Pierce smiled at every detail like it was progress. He said he would keep it organized. He said he would keep us safe. And for a few weeks, it worked. The break-ins stopped. People thanked him in the grocery store. He sent daily updates like an office manager. He had walkie-talkies. He had patrol routes. He had a calm voice that made your body unclench without you noticing. My wife slept better. I stopped listening for footsteps at night. Then the small wrong things began. Pierce would mention being out of town, but someone would swear they saw him at the store. He would claim he spent the evening at home reviewing logs, yet his house would be dark, not a single glow, like nobody was inside. Once, I saw him walking late in black clothes with a duffel bag, moving fast, not patrolling, not looking around like a watchman, but heading somewhere with purpose. When I brought it up, he laughed too quickly and changed the subject. The next break-in was different, cleaner, smarter. The Henderson family got hit during a wedding everyone had talked about at the meeting. The thieves went straight to the hidden drawer, skipped the obvious electronics, took cash from the pantry can. No forced entry, no mess. Just a house that suddenly felt violated in a way that made you look at your own walls like they were not solid. Pierce called an emergency meeting and acted furious. He used all the right words, but his anger felt performed like a man playing the role of protector because the audience expected it. He kept pushing for more details, more updates, more precision. He said we needed to tighten the schedule tracking. He said we were missing gaps. He said criminals love gaps. A week later, I forgot my lunch on the counter. I turned back, annoyed, thinking about nothing. When I pulled onto our street, I saw Pierce's car parked in the Vincent house driveway. The Vincents were away. Everyone knew they were away. Pierce knew because he'd written it into the patrol schedule himself. I parked a few houses down and watched through my windshield, heart pounding for no reason I wanted to admit. He came from the side yard carrying a small bag, walking like he belonged there. When he saw me, he waved and approached my window with the same easy confidence. He told me he was doing a security check. He said he was making sure everything looked right. He said he would hate for something to happen while they were gone. His eyes kept flicking toward the house, like he was counting seconds, like he was measuring whether he had time to finish whatever he'd started. I nodded. I smiled. I waited until he drove off. Then I called the police. They stopped him a few blocks away. Inside his trunk, they found break-in tools, gloves, a pry bar wrapped in cloth, and items that didn't belong to him, items that belonged to our street, to the houses we'd stood inside together, drinking coffee and talking about safety. The officer who called me back sounded different now, focused, tight, like the situation had teeth. When they searched Pierce's home, they found the real nightmare, not just stolen goods, not just tools, a notebook, a map of every house with notes written beside each one, work schedules, vacation plans, where valuables were kept, which windows stuck in humidity, who left their garage door unlocked during trash day, who kept a spare key and where they hid it. The pages were filled with our lives, reduced to opportunities. Pierce had not protected us. He had studied us. He had turned our fear into a system. He created the crimes that made us desperate, then offered the solution that made us confess everything he needed. He was not the fox in the henhouse. He was the one who built the fence and taught the hens to open the gate for him. He went to prison. People said justice was done, but the watch did not end when he left, because he taught us something we cannot unlearn. We stopped waving. We stopped sharing. We stopped trusting the idea of community, because we learned how easy it is to weaponize it. The street got quieter, not safer. Quieter, like a room where everyone is pretending not to hear something moving behind the walls. And here is the part I never told the police. The night before they arrested him, I found a folded sheet of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in careful block letters, the kind you use when you want to hide your real hand. Inside, one line. You were easy, too. I showed it to the detective, but he said it could have been anyone, maybe a copycat, maybe a prank, They never included it in the case. But I knew, because Pierce never wrote like that. His handwriting was neat, looping, almost elegant. This was different. And sometimes I wonder if Pierce was the whole story, or just the first person we caught.